At the time of recording this video, plenty of big free agents still remain on the board, like Blake Snell, Jordan Montgomery, Matt Chapman, and JD Martinez. What's the common denominator between all five? Well, that would be one of the most well-known sports agents in the land, Scott Boras. Over the years, we've seen plenty of big-name players represented by Boras get big money contracts, some good and some bad. In this video, I'm going to go over the 5 best and 5 worst Scott Boras contracts. Before I get to the 5 best, I want to go over some honorable mentions, some more recent players like Garrett Cole, Bryce Harper, Corey Seager, and Marcus Semien, all represented by Scott Boras, who have gotten some huge contracts, and so far they are paying off, but let's see how they go down the road. Now let's start off with the 5 best, and up first I have Alex Bregman. I know, there was the whole sign stealing thing, whatever, I'm past that. Bregman, though, has been extremely consistent for Houston. Since inking a 5-year, $100 million extension back in 2019, he's done nothing but produce minus a slightly down 2021 season. Overall, he's posted a 13.2 Fangraph WAR since 2020 when the contract began, which ranks 30th among position players since then, and 5th among third basemen. During this time, he's made a total of $71.5 million, but he's produced a field value of $105.3 million, which equals out to a return on investment of around $34 million for the Astros. He's got one more year on the deal before he hits free agency next year, but I would say overall, this has been a pretty solid contract. Up next, I have Jose Altuve. It's not only Bregman that's helped give the Astros success. Back in 2018, Altuve and the Astros agreed to a 7-year, $163.5 million contract extension, and he's done nothing but produce since then. Not only did he help the Astros win the World Series in 2022, but like Bregman, also helped them get to the ALCS in every other year of his contract, which finishes up after this season. In the postseason, he's been an amazing performer, hitting 27 home runs, which ranks second all-time, and since signing his new contract, he's hit 20 home runs in postseason action. Overall, since signing his new deal, he's posted a 26.1 Fangraph WAR, which ranks 16th in the major leagues among all position players. Up to this point, he's made around $121 million, but he's been worth a whopping $209 million and $88 million return on investment. Up next, I have Alex Rodriguez. Now, I know what you might be thinking. How could I put A-Rod and all of his drama on this list? PED use aside, A-Rod in his first contract he received from the Rangers for 10 years and $252 million was money well spent, despite him opting out a few years before the end of it. For the Rangers, they paid him just under $60 million from 2001 to 2003 and did end up having to pay $67 million of his salary after he was traded to the Yankees before the 2004 season. So overall, around $125 million, with some of it deferred, came out of the Rangers' pockets. However, during his 3 seasons in Texas, A-Rod was excellent, as he hit .305 with an OPS of 1.010 and won the MVP in 2003, equaling out to a field value of around $110 million, a little under what he was paid. In the end, though, the Rangers basically broke even, as they also received players back in the trade with the Yankees, including Alfonso Soriano, who was very productive for them for 2 seasons at a very little cost. Now for his time with the Yankees. I mentioned earlier he opted out of his deal after the 2007 season, but he continued to be one of the best players in baseball from 2004 to 2007. The Yankees ended up paying him $83 million during that span, but it was well worth it as he produced $140 million in field value, a surplus of about $57 million. This included a batting average of .303, an OPS of .976, a WRC plus of .154, and an average of 43 home runs a season. In the end, A-Rod lived up to his first contract despite it being 3 years shorter than the original deal, and was well worth the money. Let's move on to Adrian Beltre. Speaking of the Rangers, let's talk about a Ranger that just got inducted into the Hall of Fame, Adrian Beltre. Funny enough, before he ended up playing with the Rangers, he had 5 pretty average seasons with the Seattle Mariners after signing a 5-year, $64 million deal with them. After one very good season in Boston, he ended up signing with the Rangers on a 6-year, $96 million deal. Let's just say that one worked out pretty well. Over the course of that deal, he hit .308 with an .873 OPS, along with an average of 28 home runs per season, all while playing stellar defense during that time. Overall, he put together a field value of about $243 million compared to his $96 million earnings, a $147 million return on investment for the Rangers. And to me, the best Scott Boras contract there is was Max Scherzer. This one is just a no-brainer. While his latest whopping contract of 3 years and $130 million he signed with the Mets hasn't gone too much to plan, his 7-year, $210 million contract he signed with the Nationals in 2015 was worth every penny and then some. During his 6.5 seasons with the Nationals and half a season with the Dodgers, he was tremendous, winning 2 straight Cy Youngs, all while posting an ERA of 2.75, a FIP of 2.87, just under 12 strikeouts per 9, 2 walks per 9, all while averaging over 30 starts per season. He also helped the Nationals win the World Series against a powerhouse Astros team in 2019. All in all, he put up about $318 million in field value, which is over a $100 million return on investment. The Nationals will be paying about half of his contract in deferred money until 2028, but in my opinion, this was the best Scott Boras contract ever negotiated. Before we get to the 5 worst Scott Boras contracts, there are a few dishonorable mentions to go over. There was Barry Zito, whose contract as a whole was bad, but he did help the Giants win a World Series. There was Jake Arrieta, who signed a 3-year, $75 million deal with the Phillies, which was pretty much a bust, minus 1 okay season. Jacoby Ellsbury was pretty bad, but he did contribute a little bit. There's also Chris Bryant and Anthony Rendon, where Chris Bryant's first 2 years of a 7-year, $182 million contract with the Rockies has been non-existent, while Anthony Rendon has produced pretty much nothing while having a lot of injuries and basically saying he hates baseball. However, both still have time left on their contracts, so they could still get things going, but it's not looking great. Now, let's get to the 5 worst Scott Boras contracts. And with the good comes the bad. And now let's talk about Alex Rodriguez yet again, but the second contract he signed. After Rodriguez opted out of his 10-year, $252 million contract in 2007, he ended up re-signing a new 10-year, $275 million contract to stay with the Yankees long-term. The first 4 seasons of his new deal from 2008 to 2011 went great, as he hit .284 with an OPS of .896, an average of 27 home runs per season, helped the Yankees win the World Series in 2009, and also hit his 600th home run in 2010. However, during those years, his offensive numbers steadily declined, which was followed up by 2 underwhelming and injury-riddled seasons in 2012 and 2013, as well as a season-long suspension due to PEDs in 2014. While he did bounce back with a decent season in 2015, the contract as a whole ended up being very underwhelming. He was paid $275 million, but overall only produced $140 million in field value, a negative surplus of $135 million. Sure, the Yankees did win a World Series in 2009 and probably made a lot when it came to merchandise and ticket sales, but combined with his suspension and overall ineffectiveness in the latter part of his deal, I think it's safe to say this contract as a whole wasn't the best. Let's move on to Prince Fielder. This one is tough for me to put here because Prince Fielder was one of my favorites growing up, and his career was essentially robbed by neck problems that led to his early retirement. However, when strictly looking at the numbers and dollars spent, his contract he signed with the Tigers ended up being pretty bad. Fielder was amazing with the Brewers in the first part of his career, ranking 11th in WRC+, with an average of 38 home runs per season from 2006 to 2011. This led to a massive contract with the Detroit Tigers, his father's old team, for 9 years and $214 million. The first season of his deal went great, as he hit .313 with a .940 OPS and a .153 WRC+, which ended up being worth way more than what he was paid that year. However, year 2, his numbers dipped a smidge, and while they weren't bad, it wasn't worth the $23 million he was paid that season, and he didn't perform well in the postseason. He ended up being traded to the Rangers in a shocking deal for Ian Kinsler, who was also coming off a slightly down year, and the Tigers did cover some of Prince Fielder's contract. Eventually, while he did have a decent year in 2015, he was forced to retire early due to neck problems. Overall, he did forfeit some money due to retirement, but he ended up making about $178 million over the course of the contract, contract, but only produced about $55 million in field value. Up next, I have Eric Hosmer. After winning a World Series with the Royals in 2015, Eric Hosmer was one of the better first basemen in the game and was hitting the market for the first time. He ended up signing a huge contract with the Padres before the 2018 season for 8 years and $144 million, which did seem like a huge overpay to some, considering his best season up to that point was his walk year, in which he posted a Fangraph WAR of 3.8, which is good, but not what people thought was worth the contract he got. In the end, most people's concerns were proven right, as Hosmer went on to become one of the worst contracts of all time. His best season came during the shortened 2020 season, as he hit 287 with an 850 OPS over 38 games, but that small sample size didn't translate to much after. He was eventually traded to the Red Sox a couple of years later before being released shortly after and latching on with the Cubs before eventually calling it a career. Overall, he made around $105 million during that contract and is scheduled to make about $26 million in deferred money, a total of about $131 million, which when compared to his field value of $0.3 million during that time is absolutely horrendous. Now let's talk about Chris Davis. Before signing a 7-year, $160 million extension in 2016, Chris Davis was one of the best power bats in the game, averaging about 40 homers a season from 2012 to 2015. One big issue, though, was the strikeouts, as he struck out more than 30% of the time during that stretch. That didn't stop the Orioles from reaching an agreement with Scott Boras, though, but it eventually turned into a complete nightmare. While he did hit 38 home runs in 2016, there wasn't much else, as the strikeout numbers continued to pile up while the power numbers started to go down, and he even endured a record 62 straight plate appearances without a hit, a record to this day. In the end, he played 5 of the 7 seasons of the deal before calling it a career. During that time, he made about $74 million and will eventually receive a total of just under $65 million in deferred money after retirement, a total of around $138 million. From the beginning of his contract to the end of his career, he put up a field value of negative $20 million, which would end up creating a negative surplus of negative $158 million. And last but not least, the worst Scott Boras contract of all time goes to Stephen Strasburg. I actually hate putting this here because it's really unfortunate what happened to Strasburg in his career. His debut back in 2010 was electric, and while he did have a lot of ups and downs with his health, he helped the Nationals win a World Series in 2019 while also being named the World Series MVP, and did have some solid years up to that point. After winning the World Series in 2019, Strasburg went on to sign a massive 7-year, $245 million deal with the Nats, which is an AAV of $35 million per season. However, this deal hasn't worked out, and then some, as the most he's pitched since then was 21 2/3 innings in 2021, amounting to a value of $0.2 million. Recently, reports surfaced that Strasburg has essentially called it a career, and it looked like there was going to be a retirement ceremony for him until the Nationals abruptly canceled it a couple days prior. It seems that Strasburg and the Nationals are at a stalemate when it comes to the rest of his contract, as they would like to try and restructure the remainder of it while also wanting him to mentor the younger guys at spring training. Most likely, the Nationals will end up having to pay all of the $245 million on his contract, since they didn't have insurance on it. While Strasburg was a huge part of history for the Nationals before that contract, this will go down as one of the biggest bust contracts in history, and the man that made it happen was none other than Scott Boras. So that's it for this video. Tell me what you think down below in the comments. Did I miss any of the best or worst Scott Boras contracts? Let me know. Before you get out of here, if you can, hit that like button, subscribe if you're new, and I'll talk to you next time.